All right. Welcome, Candice, to the podcast. I'm super excited to have you with us today and chat about some juicy topics. I'd love for you to, first of all, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you for having me. My name is Candice Rebollo. I'm an intuition coach. I'm a breathwork facilitator. I also have created and certified people in the process called ancestral alignments. And I'm just really excited to share what I do and just to continue to train light workers, star seeds, psychic mediums all around the world. So that's the gist of what I do. I do many other things as well.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you so much. And I'd love to know like what brought you to this path because I know we're going to talk about like inner child healing, relationships, like all of this kind of stuff. And for the most part, it's not like the classic career path where we're like, oh yeah, I want to like become a doctor and I go to school. Like usually stuff happens in your life that brings you to this path. So I'm curious like what sort of brought you to this world.
Yeah, definitely not a typical career path. I would say it was two things. One, I've always known since I was a little girl that I'd be doing this kind of work. Um, and then two, it was like I had a traumatic childhood. So as I was experiencing trauma, I knew that I was going to have to heal myself out of that trauma and teach others to do the same. I always had this like voice, this higher self, this guidance, these guides that were really kind of walking me through things as they were happening and sort of giving me snapshots saying, it was almost like a don't worry, you're safe. You're going to heal through this one day. And again, you're going to turn around and help so many others. So it was really what brought me to it is the childhood I had and then healing myself through it and bringing myself through so much forgiveness and love, which was just a byproduct. I had no idea that I was actually going to heal myself through these things, but I did. It was just a byproduct. The forgiveness and the healing was a byproduct of trying to feel better and get better from the states that I had been conditioned into.
I love that. And it's so often that, we go on our healing path and then we start to feel better. We start to see things happen in our life, like things are changing. And then we just can't help but share it with others, right? Which is just such a
Yes.
beautiful journey, too, because I think it's so powerful when you actually have the embodiment and the experience, which is like, it's very hard to, I think, teach this stuff, coach this stuff, bring people through this experience if you haven't done it. And
Totally.
it's usually does not happen that way. Like you don't come across like a textbook about like inner child healing, then you're like, I had to teach this, right? Like you have your own experience first.
Absolutely. I think experience is the best for teaching. I think that's, all of us are here to teach something. All of us are here to serve humanity in one way or another. And I think like personal story, personal experiences, and what we have gotten ourselves through because we know our journey, we know our struggle, and that allows us to relate empathetically to so many other stories and help people through it. And I've created so many different methods and modalities to help people through these things because it's not easy and it can feel like an endless game and it can feel like you're never going to get out of old states of being or awareness into the frequency, the pocket, the dreams that you want, but it's totally possible.
I love that. And I know you mentioned inner child healing and trauma and all of that. And I think sometimes it's easy to sort of misunderstand what it is or who it's for, because ultimately, a lot of the time we might think like, oh, I didn't really have a traumatic experience. I had a pretty good, upbringing. So, in your perspective, opinion, what really is inner child healing and who is it for?
Mm, it's a very good question because some people might think, oh, inner child healing, that must be for people who really had terrible childhoods. Um,
Mhm.
and it's actually not true. It's for everyone on the spectrum of, traumatic childhood to I feel like I had what I needed when I was younger. Um, so it's for everyone, truly. And healing and working with the inner child is really about coming back to joy and the child like wonder to get out of childish behavior and into the childlike wonder and joy of what the soul really wants to do. The child holds all the secrets of your dreams, wants, wishes. There's a key that the inner child has when you keep the inner child alive. There's something about it. It like keeps your spirit alive. My brother and I were just talking actually, and we were talking about like our ages, and we were both like how we don't feel our ages And it so much has to do with like we were both still very like young at heart, very playful, like very sweet. I'll forever like watch, animated movies until the day I die. I'm like such a kid at heart, and there's just so many things I honor about my childlike experiences and play that I still bring into adulthood and own and honor within myself. And it's tied to creativity and it's tied to life purpose. So when you can really fulfill the needs of your inner child, right? Even if you weren't dramatically abused, let's say, like I was in your childhood, there's likely still something suppressed in your childhood that you didn't get the chance to do. Play a sport, dance, sing, ballet, I don't know, build airplanes, right? There's something in your childhood experience that's likely never been completed. And when you go out of your way to make sure you complete these things for your inner child, beautiful things start to happen. Synchronicities, miracles, abundance lands. Life can pivot in the most beautiful ways. It can lead you to meet a soulmate. Like there's so many things that happen once people start operating in the realm of that childlike wonder. If you're like me, now you just like go off and travel the world and do retreats wherever you want to go, so you get paid to do the things you love doing, right? That's my childlike wonder. It's like my dream to go and frolic in the wheat fields of Great Britain and visit crop circles, right? Like that's childlike wonder. So when you keep that alive, there's certain blessings that you receive in life.
It's so true. And I think we are programmed to, especially around like the age of 18, like time to grow up. You're an adult now, like no
So
more,
sad.
childish behavior. And
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up because that's also something I definitely saw in my journey where it was like repressing that side of me because
Yes.
we do have different parts of us. Like we do have an inner child that's, inside of us. But if we, like you said, neglect it, suppress it, repress it, it's still there. Like it's
Yeah.
going to, it's going to show up in some way. And for me,
Yes.
that's like, sometimes I'll even have like adult tantrums, especially in the past where it's like, why am I reacting like this? Or like, you'll show up obviously, and we're going to talk about relationships, in your relationships when your needs
Oh,
are not
yes.
met, you're not fulfilling that part of you,
Yep.
that part of you is being silenced, like it's going to show up. And this is where we see like so many adults just overreact or have these reactive responses that are just detrimental to the people around them, etc. So I think that's such an important part because there is a part of like acknowledging the desires and the needs and the wants, and also looking at what are these parts of us that might have been, silenced, guilt tripped, shamed, etc. Because those are the parts that are going to be still there and sort of showing up in our lives, in our reactions and things like that. So I think there's like multiple parts of this too, where it's like honoring the playful side, the needs, the desires, but then also looking at the parts of us that have actually not been seen, heard. And that
Ooh,
is within all of us because
totally.
it doesn't matter if you've had like big T trauma or small T trauma, like our inner child has been neglected across the board.
Exactly.
And it's up to us to reparent that. And I think that we can show up as even better adults when we actually look at these things, right?
I couldn't agree more. And I like that you said big T, little t trauma, because to the child and to the soul, it actually doesn't matter. Like trauma is trauma. And so we don't have to get into like like compare and contrast, because that's something that leads to suppression too. I actually run into this a lot in my work where I'm working with a certain client and they're so afraid to like address things in their ancestry or lineage because they feel guilty, like it means they're rejecting the lineage if they acknowledge something bad happened or a need is not fulfilled. It's not about making anyone wrong. And if we think about it, your ancestors and your lineage, your parents, they did exactly what they needed to do to get you here. And any trauma you received, good, bad, middle, extreme, it's actually your greatest gift. So you don't have to be afraid to lean into it and look at it and maybe kind of put it under a microscope a little bit, because that's where your biggest healing lies. That's where your abundance lies. When you unlock that, when you heal that thing, the being seen, like you said, the maybe for the more like taboo or suppressed ones like sexual trauma from childhood, right? Whatever the case might be, whatever experience you had as a child, when you start looking at it and going there and fulfilling the needs and whatever neglect happened, writing that for yourself, um, boy, do you start shifting, and other things, other areas of your life open up. So there's no like stigma, there's no shame in what spectrum, where in the spectrum you feel like you reside. For anyone listening, like there is no comparison, and there is no wrong. There's no it's bad guy, good guy either. It's like this is what happened. When you can look at it objectively and with love and without judgment, you see like there's so much healing to be done in the best ways.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because oftentimes we think that if I look at this thing, it's going to make it bigger. I'm not going to be able to get out of it. It's going to make it such a bigger deal, all of these stories. But the fact is, it's already within us, like we're holding on to it energetically. We have shame, guilt, anger, resentment,
Exactly.
whatever it is, these lower vibrational fear emotions, frequencies. And so that is held in our body, as you know. So it's not like, oh, I'm not just going to look at it like, so it's not there. Like it is still there though. So,
Yes.
and then we're holding on to that frequency that's associated with it instead of it's like when we shine a flashlight in the dark, like we bring the light to it. And oftentimes it's like, often when we don't look at things, like for instance, I'm not going to look under the bed because I'm scared, like there might be this and that. But then when you shine a light, you're like, oh, there was just a teddy bear kind of thing. Like it's
Yes.
always when it's in the dark that it's
Yes.
bigger, more frightening. Like we all know this. When we avoid something, it's bigger and it's just it takes up so much more space and emotional reactivity or emotional frequency, etc. Versus when we
Yes.
actually do the thing, we face the thing, we look at the thing, then it's like, oh, I feel freer because I am not avoiding this thing anymore. And that takes energy when we're avoiding something that we know is there, right? But it
Oh
does
my
take
gosh.
courage, of course. And needing having a safe space to look at that, I think is like really important as well.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And it's like, you can liken it to when you procrastinate doing something and then you do that thing and it took like 2 minutes. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I put that thing off for that long and it was that easy. You'd be surprised how much of this work is like that. Like, it's just a simple need. It's just a simple statement. It's just a simple acknowledgement. It's just a simple awareness of seeing that that thing happened, and it made you believe something about yourself that wasn't true, and you're still living and operating from that place and space right now. And you would never know that it's affecting you, but everywhere you go, there you are. It's going to show up in your relationships at work, with friends, with lovers, with family, with yourself, most importantly. So I couldn't agree more. Like it is a teddy bear. Let me tell you, all the things, all the big, like the boogie woogie man. When you look under that bed, it's all to bring you back to love.
Yeah, and essentially it's we're avoiding the feeling that we don't want to feel. But the thing is, when we actually feel the feeling, it doesn't last that long. Like it's usually what 90 seconds that like an emotion, if we really feel into it. And then we're like free of it.
Yes.
And so we're just avoiding a feeling, an emotion. And the other thing that you also brought up is like, I think a lot of the time we can look at like generational trauma or like patterns and cycles and stories and inner child wounding and a lifetime of being a certain way and all of these things. We think that, oh, it's going to take if it's a lifetime like that I've had these things and I've, reacting this way and I have all of this trauma, then it's going to take like a lifetime to get rid of it. And that's absolutely not true because especially if we're using like somatic work like you do,
Yes.
we can let go of things like that very quickly. Like it
Very
doesn't
quick.
have to be the same amount of time. And I think that that might be also something that can keep people from doing this work where it's like I have so much baggage, so much stuff. I've always been this way. It's going to take like so long. It's going to be so hard. And so then, yeah, obviously, it's like I don't even want to open Pandora's box. Like it's going to be never ending. I'm never going to be able to get out of it. But that's our ego. That's just like, I don't want to feel that feeling. I don't want to be uncomfortable. Let's just put it under the rug and then hopefully no one looks at it kind of thing.
Yes.
Right.
And it's like, okay, no one's going to look at it. Sure, go ahead and pass that down to your children. We'll see how well that looks. Because whatever you deflect, it has a funny way of coming back through whatever mirror or means possible, meaning it's going to come through in some relationship or another, be it the children you bear and bring into this life or the relationships you're in. You cannot escape the things that you try to ignore. You cannot escape your lack of self-worth. You cannot escape the wounded parts of you that lash out at people. You cannot escape your toxic patterns in relationships. So then you're going to pass it on to your children. You're going to see and then judge your children from being in toxic relationships when you never healed from that one thing that happened way back when and really integrated past that. So it's going to come back. It's all about how you want to face it. There are more gracious ways to face these things than having to bump up against them uncomfortably in our environment. We can actually choose. It can be a choice to look at these things and do the work before things get wilder
Yeah,
and
it's
funner,
that.
let's say more chaotic. And there's no judgment either way, because let me tell you, both serve. I'm not here to judge any of those processes, and I've been through all of them. So I say that like with love and non-judgment, but I do know based on my work, and that's why I've created my work to be what it is, because I know I can save people the time. I know I can save people the headaches. I've seen it live. I know I'm actually saving people lifetimes of karmic patterns that they've missed. And now they have this ample opportunity in this lifetime at this convergence of awakening that we're in to really clear so much. Right now, humanity has the potential as individuals and collectively to clear so much dark and negative karma from not only the past in this life, but the past in so many other lives. And it is such a gem right now. We're living in such a powerful and potent time. And I don't think people should take this for granted.
Yeah, and it is beautiful to see the sort of awakening that's happening where this conversation was not happening like 50 years ago, even less
No,
than that. Like,
no.
even, the
10,
generation
5.
before us, like, don't talk about this kind of stuff. We don't look at like, these taboo subjects or like emotions, like God forbid, talk about your emotions. Like it's amazing to see though that more and more people are actually waking up to this, taking accountability and learning that like, oh yeah, I can actually heal these things and I don't need to pass them down and I don't need to keep
Correct.
repeating these cycles. It's not just who I am, it's not just who I'll always be, that kind of thing. So it's
Mm,
like really beautiful. And I think the more conversations we have about this, the better. But I'd
totally.
love to also ask you, switching gears a little bit, but also staying in the same realm,
Hmm.
how inner child healing relates to the nervous system, because I don't think a lot of people talk about this.
Yeah. So your nervous system is like, I liken it to like it's kind of like your electrical system, but I feel like it also has to do with your magnetism as well, right? Electromagnetism. Electro meaning the masculine energy, the go getter, the spark, right? Versus the magnetic energy, which is the feminine, which attracts. So I feel like when I see people with shot nervous systems, right, from past childhood trauma that they don't even know they're functioning with, they tend to self sabotage in different ways and they tend to uh, push away deeper awareness about themselves, and their consciousness is super comfortable in a very shallow place, but it actually is not really serving them. They're typically wasting time, life force energy, and lots of potential that they have in this lifetime. So when you actually start to work with the nervous system and give the nervous system more ways to cope with past trauma, and not just cope, but then have the nervous system experience the missing experience that they had, you start to piece together the puzzle for the nervous system to actually relax and chill and be okay with like an exhale, like a relief. And it's funny because you don't know what you're carrying until you put it down. And because we've been carrying it likely our whole lives since childhood, we don't know another way. And it's not until we release ourselves from the things we don't even know we're carrying that we're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. How was I even functioning before? How did I even get stuff done? I was working like 10 times harder than I am now. And so your nervous system, when it's shot, you just get used to dealing with bullshit. And you stay there in that lane and you think that lane is normal, but you're exhausted, you're working harder, you're depressed, you're anxious, you feel despair. Like for me, it was like such despair. I used to have these like huge, big dreams that I thought were so unattainable. And I'd wake up every morning and like just in despair and like just so saddened, but at such a deep level that I had to go and do things I didn't want to do for money. And so it takes a lot of healing the nervous system first and learning how to listen to the wisdom of the body. When you listen to the wisdom of the body, you give it opportunities to heal itself, like in my psychic somatic sessions, um, beautiful things start to unfold in your life. It does not make sense how feeling the anger that you've been holding on to in your body can help you manifest better down the road, but it is so true. It is so true. And when you start to practice states of higher awareness, higher being, when you start to fill in them again, the missing experience you had um, through just practicing the state in your body. It doesn't even have to be a real interaction. When you practice the state in your body in these sessions, it's the real thing to your unconscious brain, to your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind's like, "Oh, finally this need is fulfilled. Finally this thing that we've been wanting our whole lives, like boom, it's there." And you actually did it through play. You did it through a session that actually wasn't the, let's say, the real thing, but it is the real thing, if that makes sense. So you start healing all these little bits and pieces of yourself that you didn't even realize were out there as loose threads, and you just start to defragment. You start to come back to yourself. We start to bring back the whole picture, and the nervous system just like can finally it's funny too, because when I work with some people, one of the things you'll see is they get so tired after sessions and they think that's something bad. And I'm like, that's so good. Do you realize how much sleep, how much anxiety you've held on to? Now your body's like, permission without guilt to sleep. Go sleep. Go sleep for as long as you need to. Like, that's part of the healing journey too, for crying out loud. Like, sleep, eat, drink normally. And sometimes we're just so shot in our nervous systems, we can't handle the basics in our life, and it all compounds. It all compounds. So healing the nervous system is like, to me, just such a deep part of my work. It taught me how to swim, taught me how to not drown in my emotions, but swim in them, and then learn deep emotional intelligence, which takes many of us lifetimes. Okay, I've been working on that one for lifetimes. I know that for sure. And I really feel like I'm at a space and place where I got myself. Like, I can lean on myself. Before, it would be like emotions would come up and I would just drown and they would take me out. And it's just so different now. But it took time. It took many sessions to build that strength and that self-confidence in myself, and to see who I really was, heal past the old stuff, and like rebuild, literally rebuild my electrical magnetic system.
Yeah, it really sounds like the nervous system regulation and the inner child healing goes hand in hand. And I've seen this in my practice too, where it's like when we have all these stories and these patterns and these wounding from childhood, or like, we stories around speaking up, your voice, being seen, being heard, not being good enough, all of these things, then that can also impact our capacity for receiving more and showing up. And then obviously, like, self-sabotage, like our body can really influence that, where I've had that too, where it's just like my body is like, no, I cannot like handle more, or
Yeah,
like I can't handle this. And there will just be like self-sabotage. People pleasing is like a big sign of that too, where it's like we don't feel safe to actually ask for what we want. And it's interesting to see sort of the dynamics of how inner child healing and nervous system regulation do work hand in hand, because ultimately it is within our bodies, within our subconscious. And that's where it's like, if you just keep talking about it, like talk therapy can definitely be helpful, but it's like, if you just keep talking about it, you're just like, okay, this is a problem. You kind of reinforce it too. Like, this
yes,
is why I'm messed up. This is why nothing works for me. This
yes,
is why, la, la, la. And then you're basically just reinforcing those stories versus looking at like, what is, what are the energies that I'm holding on to? What are the stories that I actually were created from this place of disconnection and fear and all of these things? And so I love that you mentioned that too, because that's where this work can accelerate, and we can like have these quantum leaps, quote unquote,
yes.
where we see our whole reality shift and we see like big changes happen quickly, because we're actually acknowledging it on a subconscious and energetic level, right?
Absolutely. And one thing that dealing with these things and facing them head on actually does, and I see it in a lot of people, is it increases their self perceived competence. A lot of people in life feel so insecure, like they're not good enough, like they're not smart enough, like they couldn't possibly start that business, like they possibly could never shoot for the stars in that thing that they want, right? Be it relationship, be it new job, be it higher paying position, be it entrepreneur, like starting that business. People feel so worthless. People feel so taken for granted. People feel dumb. Like there's these just plain ideas that they have of themselves that are not true. They feel dumb. And when you do this work, you start to realize how strong you really are, how resilient, how powerful, how connected you are at the same time. Just like there's things you don't realize you're carrying that are negative, I promise you there's gifts you don't know you're carrying also. And those also get activated when you do this work. It's not one-sided. So you start to work on the stuff and all of a sudden like creativity, mental capacity, more just ideas, downloads, the ability to execute things, to have the action behind getting the stuff done that you really want to do. Other things start to come online. So it's not all look at the doom and gloom for a moment. Like oftentimes we're looking at gifts too, and where those gifts were suppressed and how to bring them back to life and resuscitate them and help you walk in them with pride, like healthy pride. And so I see people's competency increase so much in this work too.
Yeah, it's really reconnecting to that wholeness that was there the whole time. But,
Yeah.
we have these stories. We pile on this story on story on story and wound and all of these like emotions. And oftentimes I think it's easy to focus on as well, like, oh, I need to get rid of all this stuff, where it's like, no, we're sort of alchemizing it and we're reconnecting with
Yes.
like the true version of you who is
Yes.
effing awesome.
Yep.
And yeah, I love that you mentioned that too, because that's like that reconnection, right? Versus we have been programmed with all these things that we're talking about. And then we ultimately decide from those stories and what we saw that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I can't do this, I can't achieve that. And ultimately, it's from other people's limitations and fear and scarcity, right? And so
Yes.
then we are just sort of like operating from that place versus what is actually the truth here that is underneath all of these stories that are actually not the truth. And then let's just see like what happens in our life when we're not operating from the scarcity stories and all of, the fear programming and everything. Like this makes sense why, oh, things actually start to change in our life when we actually start to manifest more because we're not operating from the small self, the limited self, like the programming, the mask, etc. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. And there's beautiful things on the other side of the mask. Very beautiful things, very authentic things. That's where the things that we all want in life, that's where they reside. And that's what I'm really, really, really gifted at helping people see and pull out of them and help them heal into. Um, and it's my greatest joy, literally.
I know you mentioned relationships, and I'd love to sort of touch on that in terms of how inner child healing can relate to relationships. And I know you mentioned like toxic relationship too, sort of like the dynamics of that and how they relate as well. Because I think it's oftentimes like when we're not doing this work or before we're consciously aware of like our attachments and our patterns and like
Yes.
childhood trauma and generational stuff, it's like you sort of look at like what's wrong with me or like what's wrong with them, why do I keep attracting these people, and is this more of this victim energy or this like I guess I'm just not meant to find someone kind of thing until we start to look at like, oh, there's deeper stuff here, right?
Absolutely. There is always deeper stuff. I will say relationships has to be the number one thing that I've learned so much about myself through. And it can be difficult to face because it's the most painful. It is the most painful thing that we experience, relationships with our parents, with family members, with lovers, with boyfriends, husbands. These are the people who can love us the most and also hurt us the most. So it's very, very, very vulnerable work. But in relationship work, right, this typically stems back to mother and father. Mother and father to the child are like, it's the gods. Like the mother and the father are the child's God. The child is looking to these people for their every need, their every want, their every desire, for their survival. So the child has a way of attuning to the needs of the parent if the parent's not attuning to the needs of the child, right? So that means the child ends up self-sacrificing whatever to make sure they're seen in a good light so that the parent hopefully fulfills their needs. Now, when you have a parent that's abandoned them, when you have a parent that's not there, when you have a parent that's, struggles with substance abuse, is an alcoholic, whatever the case might be, that makes it even worse. So it takes a lot of healing to go back and see the nature of those first primary relationships and how that encoded you for every relationship in your future. And these things are so sneaky because you can love your parents infinitely and still have a very toxic relationship with them and not even know it, and then you'll face it in relationships and you can't even see the dynamic because your consciousness is too afraid still in its childlike way to offend mom or to offend dad or to make mom wrong or to make dad wrong, right? To make any parent wrong. So there's a book, I can't remember, it's called St. Thomas of something, and I'm not a religious person, but I remember reading this part of the book, and it's something about the book title has something with St. Thomas. I don't remember, the exact book title, but I remember reading it like, whoa, do I relate to that? And there's a part in there that says, like, if you want to push past and move past the old dynamics of who you were and how you operated in relationships, it's almost like you have to, quote unquote, kill the parents. That's not, physically, obviously, but it's like an energetic attachment cord kill. You have to kill the relationship with the child, the wounded child that you were, to free the wounded child first, so then you can actually start doing this deeper level of work. And it can take people lifetimes to see this. It can take people lifetimes. What's funny is the dichotomy of me having had a particularly challenging upbringing, really rough upbringing, made me have to do this. But because I had to do it, I was able to rebuild myself in a stronger, deeper way than most people, because they still want to maintain that strong attachment to mom and dad and never trigger them, never make them wrong, never hurt them. Whereas I was like flung out. I was like flung out of the family system because of all the things that I experienced. I had no choice. So I had to rebuild myself first and then see what the relationships were doing. And then still, believe it or not, I was able to heal my dynamics with those said parents, which I thought was impossible. I never had that as even an intention, but it's just a byproduct when you really can do the work. So there's a level of, you have to take the subjective, the like such a sensitive position and role as the child of those parents, and you have to remove yourself from that to really see objectively what the dynamics between mother and father were, how they're impacting your relationships now, and what's the repeating cycle. And it's not always for women daddy issues like so many people claim it is. It's actually mommy stuff too. And it's the same thing for men. You'll see men really like have troubled relationships with their mother and or even pedestalize them a lot, and it create really toxic dynamics for them, their relationships. It goes both ways, and it happens with both. It's not a masculine or feminine thing, it's a both thing. I see it consistently in my work. So we have to really, if we want to grow as people, look at those relationships extra clearly. And you'll see the breadcrumbs of what those relationships were in the relationships outside of parent and child dynamics that you had. You'll see it. You'll see the mirror. And when you choose to like look, stop, take a deep breath, and really just let in what's happening and not be defensive about it, you can move mountains with your personal development work if you start looking at that stuff.
Yeah, it really sounds like coming back to the conscious, bringing the unconscious to your conscious awareness, because otherwise we're just repeating patterns unconsciously and then it just keeps going, right? And also almost like reparenting yourself
Yes.
and being that parent to yourself, because oftentimes we'll have these like unconscious wounding that, happened in childhood, and then we unconsciously search for that in partners to be able to heal that. But essentially, if we don't actually, bring that awareness to our consciousness, then like I said, we're just repeating it. And this is something that I also found where for me, entrepreneurship and relationship have been the two biggest catalysts to like healing all of this stuff.
Yes.
And it was interesting because I definitely had a toxic relationship, my first relationship, very toxic. And for me, there was a lot of denial in it, like, I just need to make this work kind of thing. And at one point I sort of, came to the realization like this is not serving me. And when I met my now partner, it was interesting because I was very like kind of fluctuating between anxious avoidant.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely see the tendencies when I look back now. But now that I am like in the secure attachment, it's interesting because when I met my now partner, who we've done a lot of work together and we've come to this place of like secure, attachment, both of us.
Beautiful.
But when I first met him, I was just like, I don't know if I'm that into him. Like I was even talking to my therapist about this. Like, I don't know. There's like something missing. And then I like realized I was doing this work. Like I wasn't getting that like spark of like red flag kind of thing where it was like before when, some stuff would
Yes.
happen that was like toxic, I would get like a hit out of that, like almost like a dopamine rush. And with this, there was like no playing games, no ghosting, like very honest. And I think a part of me was just like, I don't know if I'm like into this person because they're not giving me those like yeah, so yeah, I really remember sort of like being sort of amused and just surprised by like what was going on when I realized this, like, oh, actually this was like starting to become more of like a secure, safe, like honest open relationship, and I was just not used to that, and a part of me just wanted to run away.
Mm.
But I actually stuck with it, and it was
Yeah.
interesting to like to do this work in partnership and by myself, because I think that's really another important aspect to look at. Like if somebody keeps jumping from relationship to relationship because they're scared of being alone and they just maybe no one's going to be out there or whatever, then probably it would be beneficial to like take some time like by yourself to actually like look at the stuff.
Yep.
But you can also do the work in partnership, and I believe like that is totally possible as long as the other person is also open to that. And so for me, it was really interesting to see like how I was able to sort of start to break those patterns of, choosing the person who would like play games or a ghost or whatever unconsciously. But when I started to actually see it, I was like, oh, what is happening here?
Mm-hmm.
And what am I going to choose? And I think that that is because I know it can be really difficult to like break these patterns or even
It
leave
is.
toxic relationships. And that's not something I understood until I actually went through it myself, where I was even seeing, like, oh my God, it's really hard for me to leave this, even though I know it's not right for me. And I think the conscious awareness is really, for me, in my opinion, my experience, is the first step, because then we can start to look at what am I choosing here? And maybe you don't make the choice right away to leave or choose something different or whatever, but that awareness, I think, is so key, because then we start to have more space between the unconscious pattern and what am I going to choose. I don't know what your thoughts are about that. That was a
I
lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I couldn't actually agree more with you. What I see happen, and if I'm speaking from personal experience too, it's like sometimes when you have a parent who was not there like you needed, you're desperate for their approval. You're desperate for their final acknowledgement of your specialness, of who you are. So you'll do anything for that. And it reminds you of that from when you actually felt that as a child, but you didn't even process that as a child. You didn't even fully acknowledge it that was happening to you as a kid when it was. So then you're actually playing out the same cycles, right? Because your emotional needs were not met way back when. You're so used to relationships being your emotional needs not being met and trying to force it out of people instead of looking for somebody who's like, hey, I can meet your needs. Look at me, I'm over here, I'm healthy. And you're like, nah, I'm gonna just go left. Don't know what that's like. That's not familiar. So, we're so used to struggling for love. We're so used to being desperate and looking stupid, let's just be honest, and doing the dumbest stuff in relationships. But that's how we learn. We have to go through sometimes the shame or the experiences that we don't want to really see what's happening. Like, how would you have known that you could not really feel connected to a secure attachment unless you had that experience with your ex, right? Like, how would you have not seen that gift? And then the beauty is you had someone to heal through it with you. That is so special. And that is um, what all of us as humans deserve, and that we can attain. It's just a matter of are you ready to catch the pattern? And like you said too, like we cannot be hopping from relationship to relationship because we just sort of we simply expedite the toxicity, which again, at the same time, no judgment. If you're going to do that, do it. But learn from it. Learn the pattern that you're running from, or pause in between the relationships and realize all the things that you did that you compromised your value system for to act out of alignment with who and what you really are, because there's a cost for that. There is a cost for acting out of alignment with your highest values. There's a cost for not paying attention to yourself and treating yourself with a lot of self respect and self worth in relationships and holding others to that same standard. The cost is your physical well being. This is how people's nervous system gets shot, like the number one way. This is how your abundance starts to leave. This is how your health goes away. This is where like you don't have that blessed kind of magnetic energy behind you anymore. And this is why. It's because you've compromised yourself and you're trying hard to seek validation from somebody who probably has no interest in giving it to you, or probably keeping it on like a fishing hook so that they could keep you swimming after them, because they get validation from that too. It's a very toxic cycle, and somebody's got to get off the wheel, and it better be you.
Yeah, and I love this because it really sounds like it's coming full circle with like the inner child healing, and it comes back to the self. And I know like
Yes.
self-love is thrown around a lot, but it really comes down to like, do I love myself enough and respect myself enough to actually choose something that's good for me? And that's really comes down to, and if we're not choosing things that are good for us, well, we want to look at like, well, why? There's
Yep.
probably lots of things behind that. And this is really comes down to like you mentioned, like, is this something that's really rooted in self-worth? Because oftentimes, like I said, like we can repeat these things and there everyone has their own path. Like I have definitely had a track record of just like needing the universe to send me the lesson like 17 times before I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm letting it go. But that's fine. Like that's my
Yes,
path. And obviously
exactly.
I've learned a lot from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really beautiful because ultimately if we lots of us have these, desires that are like number one. Like for some people, it's like career, money. Like when I have that, I'm going to be happy. When I have the right person, the relationship, then I'm going to be happy. But then again, it's just like we're being at the effect of our life, or yeah, basically what's happening in our life in the external environment, and we're not actually taking responsibility and looking at, well, what is the inner work that I need to do actually? And because that thing is not actually going to fulfill you. And if you don't actually look at the stuff we've been talking about, then you're probably going to choose things that are not in alignment for you and people that
Correct.
don't treat you well. And then the cycle just keeps going. So it really does come down to like the self, like working on ourselves and the relationship that we have with ourselves, because that's going to mirror with every single relationship that we have. And I know it's really annoying when people are like, well, I want this result. I want to meet the love of my life, and just tell me like, do I need to download this app, or do I need to do this routine?
Yes.
How do I activate my feminine energy? And it comes down to like the self-worth, self-love, like, you know what I mean? It's just like,
Yep.
and also um taking the action that's in alignment. So bringing the conscious awareness. And oftentimes it's like in those moments where, like I said before, like when you have that space of like, oh, I see, like I can even see patterns now. I'm like, I see the pattern. I have a choice now. Am I going to continue down that pattern, that road, or am I going to choose something else? And it's like,
Yes.
maybe it's setting a boundary, saying no. Um, even, taking a break, not reacting right now. I'm going to go for a walk and I come back and revisit this conversation. I'm not going to reply to this text and entertain this, whatever it is. And that's the uncomfortable moments, but that really make a huge difference because you're breaking that cycle. And the more and more you do it, the more you are reinforcing that identity of this is who I am, this is what I'll tolerate. Like you said, this is what I will accept. So I love that it's sort of come full circle, but I love to ask you to sort of wrap this up. I know that it can really sound like, inner child healing is thrown around a lot in this conversation, in this online space, nervous system regulation, trauma healing. And it can seem like this, again, this whole thing, like, oh my God, have to like climb up this mountain to basically heal all of this stuff. So
Mhm.
I'm wondering if there's maybe a listener who's like, yeah, I would love to, this sounds great and I'm totally on board and I'd love to like, start to do this work or I want things to change, like where can they start? Yeah, let's kind of ask that
I
question.
have, so first off, these people who might be afraid of dealing with their trauma or like where to start, you have to understand there are people like me whose literal life mission and passion in life is to do this. You find somebody like us who love to do it and who love to bring you through the breakthrough because then it's such a positive experience. So I have numerous ways to walk people through this. I have my membership called the Safe Circle. It's actually very low ticket, 65 to, depending on the tier, $90 a month. We meet once a week every Monday night. We do different things to help you learn how to get yourself into healthy attachment to you and in healthy relationships. That's Monday night, 5:30 Pacific every night. We do a breath work or an inner dance session or ancestral alignment group healing. We do so many different things. I have group speakers specifically for this reason to help people heal through their negative attachments to self and others so they come home to themselves. So there's that option. And then for those who really want to get this stuff out of the way and are really looking to attract their life purpose and embody that and heal past toxic relationships and manifest, true and everlasting love in their life, I work with people one-on-one. This is where I do all the heavy lifting for you, and it's my joy to do that because I have so many tools to do that with ancestral alignment sessions, with psychic somatic sessions. We piece something together that is just for you. And I promise you're going to come away as a different person, regardless whether you're ready for the membership or the one-on-one work. But um, that's what you do. You start with somebody who you can see has passion for it, who you can see and feel has gotten themselves from an old state of being to where they are now to embodying themselves, and you work with them. You don't do this. The worst thing you could do is sit at home on the couch and tuck yourself away and think like you just have to figure it out by yourself. If you sit and think you're going to figure this out by yourself, I guarantee you, you're not. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Healing does not happen, for the most part, in closed systems, alone, completely secluded. Reach out for help. Find a coach. Find the community. Um, be willing to work on yourself in relation to others. Be willing to bring your stuff to light. There's nothing to fear. There's nothing to shame. I've seen it all in my line of work. I've seen it all, from the joyous to the deepest and darkest stuff that you can imagine. There is no judgment. Trust me, there's someone out there who can hold space for you. And if you feel safe enough to do that with me, I am happy to walk people through that process, because it's not a singular one size fits all. And it's also not a go do it by yourself and figure it out alone. That's never how I've done any of my healing. And I would never put that on somebody else either. And that's literally why we do the things we do, right? It's to help people through that because we love it. We love to see them come away feeling better. We love them to come away having that breakthrough, about how that past ancestral incident is still operating in the family system now, how they've played a part in it, just how crazy and cosmic our traumas are really leading us to a higher version of ourselves and higher states of consciousness. When you can see it as that, you learn that dealing with your trauma, it's not about woe is me and playing victim for too long. We have a space for, we have to actually honor the victim in us too. But we move past that, and then you become the victor. And then beyond that, you become the one who's transcended and sees the thing that happened with so much love, because you understand the bigger picture and that that thing was for you, not against you. It happened so you could ascend, not so that you could descend into aloneness. So reach out, reach out, and I'll share links with you so people can hop on a third eye activation call. It's a complimentary call where we can piece together what's going on for you. We can talk more in depth about it, and I can also share the link to my safe circle. There are resources, there are tools. That's what I'm here for. That's my greatest life mission, is that in particular, to help people through their trauma.
I love that. And I love that you have like community aspect one-on-one, because I think also through my journey, like I have done a lot of one-on-one work with practitioners and healers and, all of these people, but I've also done like community, like group healing. And that
Yeah,
is just, I feel like the two are just so powerful. And sometimes there are seasons for one or the other or both, because that co regulation piece is so powerful. And seeing other
yes,
people that you can relate to, oftentimes they bring up questions that, like, oh, I didn't even think about asking that, but that's actually
exactly.
activating some healing in me. And again, like having that community, we are meant to be in connection and community. And I think we've lost a lot of that with, like, working from home, being online all the time, being in our little houses and
Yeah,
not in a community.
yeah,
And yeah, I think it's also very powerful to, do the self learning, like reading books, bringing all of this stuff to awareness. But ultimately, if we really do want to accelerate our growth and healing, I think having that person is so powerful, because like they can see blind spots that you don't see. They can
yep,
guide you through, somatic processing, because oftentimes we won't really lead ourselves through that. It's difficult. We don't really like know how to guide ourselves through that. And we will sort of like stop at a certain point. We won't see the blind spots. And so I think that's
correct.
why like this support is so, so powerful. And I love that you do provide that. So thank you so much. I'll definitely get your links to put them in the show notes. So anything you want to share, if you guys want to follow on social media.
Yes, at Candice Rebollo, CandiceRebollo. Find me on social media. Message me how this episode was for you, anything it brought up. I love having organic conversations, and I do respond.
Beautiful.
um, so, yeah, please reach out, and we're here to help, here to be of service. You're not alone. That's the most important thing. Know that you're not alone in this.